First story. I grounded my entitled son, took away his allowance, and let my new husband humiliate him with his church friends after my son defended himself from my husband's bullying. Now everything has shattered. My life has been ruined, and I regret every damn thing. I 35F have a 16-year-old son from a previous relationship, and I've been married to my current husband 37M for 4 years now. We moved in together 2 years ago when we bought our house, and I was hoping the cohabitation would bring my son and husband closer. Instead, it's been the exact opposite. My son and my husband do not get along. I don't mean typical teenage pushback or occasional friction, I mean serious tension. At this point, it's a constant undercurrent in our household. Everything is a trigger. If my son forgets to take the trash out, it turns into an argument. If he's 10 minutes late getting home from school, my husband treats it like a personal insult. There's just no grace between them. I've tried so many times to mediate or de-escalate, but every time I step in, my husband tells me to stay out of it. He insists he needs to handle it like a man, and says I just undermine him when I interfere. He claims my son needs structure and discipline, but his version of discipline has honestly turned into something borderline bullying at this point. A big issue is the nicknames. It started subtly during fights. He'd call my son genius in a sarcastic way. Then it escalated. Now every argument comes with a new insult. Dipstick, stone cold embarrassment, dweeb, numbnuts, jackwagon, arsaclown. Each one more condescending than the last. The worst part is that these insults don't just come in the heat of arguments, they linger for days after. He'll literally refer to my son by these nicknames until the next fight, or until my son apologizes for whatever the argument was about. It's humiliating, and I know it. I've confronted him several times and told him this isn't healthy. His response is always that boys need thick skin, and I can't coddle him forever. I've begged him to cut it out, especially in front of guests, but he always falls back on, he'll earn my respect when he acts like a man. It's become a power struggle between them, and I'm stuck watching it happen. For context, my son isn't a perfect angel. He can be moody, mouthy, and hard to talk to, especially with authority figures. But he's also bright, responsible, and fiercely loyal to people who treat him well. He was never like this with my ex or with teachers. The change really started when my husband moved in and started taking a more dominant role in the house. I've caught glimpses of how deeply this has affected my son. He used to be a lot more open with me, now he barely shares anything unless I press. His confidence has dipped. I've even had to talk to his school counselor because his grades started slipping last year, which was a big red flag. I know this environment is eating at him. I've thought about therapy for both of them, but my husband is the type who thinks therapy is for weak people, and getting him to attend would be a war. Back to the current issue. The nickname my husband has stuck with for the past week is arsaclown. My son had clearly reached his breaking point. He asked him multiple times to stop, told him it was getting to him, and that it felt like bullying. My husband laughed it off and said, "Stop being so sensitive, arsaclown." He genuinely treats it like a joke, even though it's very clearly not funny to anyone else. A few days ago, my son snapped. He told my husband point blank, "If you call me that one more time, I'll throw out something that matters to you." It wasn't a bluff, I knew from his tone. I had overheard the warning, and even followed up with my husband later to say, "Hey, maybe dial it back. He's not playing around." My husband scoffed and said, "He's all talk." Fast forward to 2 days ago. I was out running errands, and my son had a few friends over. I came home to a missed call from my husband, who sounded panicked on voicemail. "You need to get home now. Your son did something really messed up." Apparently, during the visit, my husband came into the living room, saw my son and his friends, and in front of all of them loudly said something like, "Don't forget to clean up after your little gathering, arsaclown." According to my son, everyone heard it. His friends laughed awkwardly. He felt humiliated. They got into a screaming match once the friends left. Then came the retaliation. In that fight, my son grabbed my husband's Bible, a personal, leather-bound one that he's had since college, with handwritten notes and bookmarks, and refused to give it back. My husband says he tried to get it from him, and my son locked himself in his room with it. When I got home, I went straight to my son. He was still heated. I asked him calmly what happened, and he told me. I told him. I warned him. He humiliated me in front of everyone, so I humiliated him back. I asked, "Where's the Bible?" And that's when he dropped it on me. "I don't have it anymore. I threw it out." My stomach dropped. I was honestly stunned. I know how important that Bible is to my husband. I told my son that no matter how angry he was, this crossed a serious line. You don't throw away someone's personal property, especially something tied to their religion. I told him this wasn't just revenge, it was a deliberate act meant to wound, and it worked. He didn't even try to deny it. I warned him. He didn't care. He can get a new one from church or something. I told him we'd talk about punishment, and he immediately said it wasn't fair that he was the one being harassed, and I was letting my husband get away with it. I tried to explain that there's a difference between verbal jabs and throwing out something sentimental, but he wouldn't hear it. He said if I punished him, then I was choosing sides. I ended up taking away his allowance for the rest of the month and grounding him from having friends over for the next 2 weekends. I also told him he needed to write an apology. He refused at first, but I left it at that. Emotions were high, and I wasn't going to force it in that moment. That's where the second wave of drama started. My son called his grandmother, my ex-mill, and told her everything. From what I gathered, he only gave her his side of the story. The insults, the nickname, the Bible, and the punishment. Within an hour, she was blowing up my phone. I didn't pick up her first call. Then she texted, "I'm coming over. You're not going to keep punishing my grandson for standing up for himself." I replied, "This isn't a conversation I'm willing to have right now. Do not come here." She showed up anyway. I didn't let her in. She stood at the door yelling, trying to argue through the screen. I stayed calm and told her this wasn't the time. I wasn't going to argue in front of my son or my husband. She finally left, but not before telling me I had lost my mind and forgotten who my son is. The text didn't stop. She said my husband was verbally abusive and that I was enabling it. That I should have been defending my son, not siding with a man who calls him names. I told her flat out that I didn't excuse my husband's behavior, but my son crossed a line when he threw out something that didn't belong to him, period. Now, my son won't talk to me. He's barely said a word in 2 days. He eats in his room. His door is shut. I tried to approach him last night and told him I want us to talk when he's ready. Nothing. I'm giving him space, but it's clear he feels betrayed. My husband, on the other hand, acted satisfied when I told him our son was punished. He asked if it would finally teach him respect. I told him the insults had to stop. He agreed but didn't apologize. He just said, "Fair is fair. Now maybe we'll get somewhere." I don't think he gets it, or maybe he just doesn't care. Here's where I'm struggling. I don't agree with how my husband speaks to my son. I never have. I've said it over and over. But he doesn't listen. He thinks teenage boys should be toughened up, and that sarcasm or name-calling is part of that. I grew up in a house where name-calling wasn't tolerated, so to me, it's not discipline, it's disrespect. I've told him that, and he's always pushed back. That said, my son's response was extreme. I can't excuse what he did. He didn't just break something out of anger, he threw out a deeply personal item, and he did it knowing exactly what it would mean to the person it belonged to. It was calculated. He didn't just snap, he retaliated. The dynamic in this house is broken. I know that. There's zero respect between them. My son doesn't see my husband as any kind of authority figure. My husband sees my son as disrespectful and soft. I've been stuck in the middle too long, and every time I try to make peace, I end up making someone feel abandoned. My ex-mill thinks I've chosen my husband over my son. My husband thinks I've been too soft on my son for years, and my son thinks nobody in this house really listens to him. I didn't punish him out of favoritism. I punished him because I honestly believe he crossed a line. If I don't set a boundary there, then we're teaching him that destroying property is a valid way to fight back, and I can't allow that, even if I understand why he did it. I don't know how to fix this. I've asked my husband to go to counseling. He refuses. I want to get my son into therapy, and I'm working on it, but he says he doesn't need to talk to a stranger, and right now he won't even talk to me. The house is silent. Everyone's mad at everyone. I'm trying to hold the line on respect and consequences, but part of me wonders if I handled this completely wrong. Should I have punished my husband too? Would that even matter? Should I have ignored what my son did because he was provoked? Or did I do the right thing by trying to enforce boundaries on both ends? I'm exhausted. And at this point, I just want peace in my own house again. But maybe that's too much to ask with two people who treat every disagreement like a war. AITA. Comments. Comment 1. YTA. And not for the punishment itself, but for letting this whole situation rot to this point. You didn't just let your husband discipline your son, you outsourced your authority to someone who clearly doesn't like him. That's not parenting. That's avoidance. You stood by and watched a grown arsaman call a teenager arsaclown and imbecile for years, and just hoped it would stop. And now you're surprised your son finally exploded. You say, he crossed a line, and yeah, he did. But your husband's been crossing lines every damn day, and you've been treating that as just his way of discipline. This is death by 1,000 cuts. And you punished your kid when he finally acted out. But you still haven't held your husband accountable. Did you make him apologize? Did you dock his beer money like you did your son's allowance? No, you let him off with a nod and a "don't do it again." That tells your son loud and clear. His pain doesn't matter unless he reacts incorrectly. You want to fix this? Step the hell up. Your husband is a bully, and your son has no safe parent in that house. You need to be one. Comment 2. NTA for punishing the Bible thing. You can't let a kid think retaliation like that is okay, even if the guy he lives with is a grade A jackarse. But you're on borrowed time here. Your husband's a petty little tyrant. Full stop. The second he started inventing SHTTY nicknames like Jackwagon, you should have shut that down hard. That's not discipline, that's ego. That's, I'm the man of the house, respect me, or I'll make you feel like garbage energy. You think your kid doesn't notice how little you push back on that? He does. And he's learning that disrespect goes unchecked if you're the adult doing it. I grew up with a stepdad like this. You know what I did? I left home at 17 and cut off my mom for 5 years. Because she stood there while her husband humiliated me and called it parenting. Your son's getting close to that cliff. Once he's 18, you might never hear from him again. Punish him, fine. But protect him too. And if your husband won't change, then you need to decide who you're really standing with. Comment 3. YTA. And you underreacted in a huge way. I don't care how many names your husband called him, your son threw away a Bible. Not just a book. A Bible. Someone's personal religious text. That's not just disrespect. That's sacrilegious. That's destruction of something sacred. And you grounded him and took his allowance. That's it. He should have been marched to that church to apologize face to face to the pastor and your husband. Actions have consequences. And if your son is old enough to plot out retaliation like that, he's old enough to learn that what he did is beyond normal teenage rebellion. This is a character issue. He didn't just lash out, he chose to hit where it hurt the most spiritually. That's next level malicious. Your husband calling him names isn't great. But verbal disrespect and spiritual vandalism aren't on the same plane. And the fact that you're even on Reddit asking AITA, instead of having your son in front of a youth pastor right now, says a lot about where your priorities are. You're raising a bitter, angry boy who's learning that there's no real line he can't cross if he feels provoked. That doesn't end well. Better start worrying about his soul now before you have bigger regrets than a trashed Bible. Update. I didn't expect to be back here this soon, but everything blew up worse than I could have imagined. Things in the house are not repairable anymore, and I honestly don't know what comes next. After the last post, I tried to hold things together, quietly grounding my son, making my husband promise to stop the name calling, and trying to keep my ex-mill from barging into my life again. For about 3 days, it was surface-level calm. Then my husband told his pastor about the Bible. At first, I thought he was just venting. But 2 days later, word spread through the congregation. People from church started messaging me asking if it was true that my boy threw out a holy book. One woman I barely know showed up at my door with her teenage son to pray for our family. Another told me, in front of my son, that she was praying for his rebellious spirit. I was furious. My husband claimed he never told anyone else, but the timing said otherwise. That Sunday, he insisted we all go to church together to show unity. My son didn't want to go, he said. They already think I'm a piece of SHT, why should I? I told him we needed to face people, not hide. He muttered, "You mean you need to face them," grabbed his hoodie, and got in the car anyway. At church, the pastor gave a sermon about disrespect in the home. It wasn't subtle. My son sat there, arms crossed, staring at the floor. When service ended, people came up to my husband with sympathetic pats and comments like, "Tough raising kids these days?" My son stood beside me, silent, until one older man said, "He'll grow out of it if he's taught properly." That's when he snapped. He raised his voice in the middle of the crowd. "Maybe he should stop calling me arsaclown and dipstick if he wants me to act respectful." You could have heard a pin drop. The pastor froze. My husband's face went red, and I felt every eye in that place turn on us. I dragged my son outside, trying to calm him down, but he kept going. "You all sit here pretending to be holy while he treats me like garbage in our own house." My husband followed us out and hissed, Get in the car before you embarrass yourself further. My son laughed bitterly. I'm the one embarrassing you. Maybe stop being an arsehole then. We got home, and it was pure chaos. My husband threw his jacket down and said, "That's it. He's out. He doesn't respect this house or me." He started packing my son's things into a duffel bag, saying he'd call my ex-mill to pick him up. I begged him to stop. My son was standing at the door, shaking, trying not to cry, but too angry to walk away. He said, "You always take his side. You say you see both sides, but you never do anything when he treats me like crap." I told him, "You're making everything worse. Just shut up." He yelled back, "I'm 16. Mom, do you really think I'm supposed to handle being humiliated every day by this man?" He kept pushing. "Why do you keep defending him? Is it because you're scared of being alone again? Because you need a man more than you need your son?" That hit a nerve. I yelled at him to stop talking like that. He didn't. He looked right at me and said, "You'd rather keep him than me." I snapped. I said something I shouldn't have. "If you could act like a decent person for 5 minutes, maybe that wouldn't be true." He just stared at me. Then he said, "Guess I finally know where I stand." He went to his room. My husband said, "See? This is exactly what I'm talking about." I told him to shut up. He walked out of the house and didn't come back that night. The next morning, my ex-mill was at the door again. She'd heard about the church scene from someone there. She screamed that I was emotionally destroying her grandson, that she was calling a lawyer, and that she had screenshots from my son's texts showing everything her ex-son-in-law, my husband, called him. My son had apparently been documenting it for months. She said, "You want to play mother? Watch how the court handles this." I told her to get off my property. She left, but not before shouting, "You already lost him. You just don't know it yet." When I went upstairs later that day to check on my son, he was gone. His phone was still charging, but his backpack and a few clothes were missing. I found a note. "I can't do this anymore. You chose him. Don't bother coming after me. I'll be safe." He was at his grandmother's, obviously. I called, and she confirmed it. He said he'd stay with her until things were safe again. That night, my husband came home, acting smug. "Good," he said. "He needed to go. Maybe he'll learn some respect." He genuinely believes this is a victory, that peace means silence. But it's not peaceful. It's empty. The house feels wrong. My husband keeps trying to reassure me. He'll come back when he grows up. I can't even tell him how scared I am that he won't. And here's the part I hate admitting. When my son asked me why I couldn't just let him leave, he was right about one thing. I didn't stop my husband for him, I stopped him for me. Because if my son leaves, it feels like I failed again. Failed at my first marriage, failed at parenting, failed at keeping a family together. I told myself I was fighting for stability, but really, I was fighting to not be alone. Now I'm alone anyway, just surrounded by the noise of my own decisions. My husband wants me to block my son's number until he apologizes. My ex-mill keeps texting that she'll get a custody lawyer if I try to bring him back before he wants to. And I'm sitting here wondering how I let this all rot so far that my kid thinks his mom chose a man who humiliates him over her own blood. I don't even know what to call this situation anymore: a family, a marriage, a collapse. Maybe all of it. Comments. Comment 1. I've taught high school for 15 years and seen this pattern more times than I care to count. You didn't lose your son because of one fight or one punishment. You lost him because you trained him to expect that every time his stepdad hurt him, you'd rationalize it. You stood there in the middle, pretending to be neutral, while he got chipped away piece by piece. That's emotional neglect dressed up as balance. The way he asked you those questions. Is it because you're scared of being alone? That's a kid who's been studying his parents' weaknesses. He wasn't just lashing out. He was describing your whole dynamic in one sentence. And you proved him right when you screamed that awful line about him not being decent. He didn't leave because of your husband. He left because you made peace mean silence, not safety. He's probably more emotionally mature than both adults in that house combined. You can fix this only if you own the truth. You protected your comfort, not your child. And if you don't make that call or visit soon, that door might close for good. Comment 2. NTA for punishing the Bible thing. But you are delusional if you think your husband's behavior isn't the core of this whole mess. You keep painting him as stern or disciplinary when he's just a controlling jerk with zero emotional intelligence. I grew up with that exact guy. Every little thing was a test of respect. My stepdad once called me little SHT for brains in front of guests and said I needed to man up. My mom did exactly what you're doing, told me to stay calm and not make it worse, and that he means well. She wanted peace so bad that she sold me out for it. I stopped talking to her at 18. I'm 31 now, and she still texts me on my birthday. That's all that's left. Your son leaving to go to his grandma's wasn't rebellion. It was survival. You think your husband won because the house is quiet? No. He just removed the only person who ever challenged his ego. And you're still clinging to him because admitting the truth means your marriage was a mistake. You can either go get your son and fix this while you still can, or double down on this man and lose your kid permanently. There's no middle ground anymore. The silence in that house isn't peace. It's the sound of you being left behind. Update. It's been almost 6 months since my son left, and I don't even know where to start. Nothing in this house feels the same. Not that there's much of a household left. After he went to live with my ex-mill, things got worse fast. She filed for temporary guardianship within weeks, claiming emotional neglect. I found out through a letter from family court. She included screenshots of messages between my husband and my son, all the names he'd been called, the way my husband mocked him, even one where he wrote, "You'll never be man enough for your mum to respect you." I didn't even know that text existed. When I showed my husband, he just shrugged and said, "He asked for it." Court was brutal. The judge didn't even look at me for the first 10 minutes, just kept flipping through the file. My ex-mill sat there stone-faced, my son next to her, not looking up once. The social worker said my son expressed a desire to remain in his grandmother's care due to a history of verbal conflict and emotional distress. My husband refused to testify or appear. He said, "It's your mess, not mine." That's when it clicked. He never saw himself as part of our family. Just a man running his own household. The court granted temporary guardianship to my ex-mill for 6 months. I wasn't stripped of rights, but I couldn't force him to come home or contact him without his consent. It felt like losing custody without technically losing it. After court, I tried calling my son. He didn't answer. I texted, emailed, and sent letters, nothing. He finally sent a single text. "I don't want to talk right now. Please don't come here." I kept trying. I even drove by my ex-mills once, but she threatened to call the police if I didn't leave. She told me, "You chose your husband over your son. Don't try to rewrite it now." Meanwhile, my husband acted like nothing happened. He kept saying, "He'll grow up and come crawling back. Don't let his tantrum break you." But something had shifted, not in him, but in how I saw him. I started noticing how he spoke to me. Every argument became personal. He started throwing things I'd confided about my first marriage in my face, like weaponizing my own past to keep me small. The last straw came 3 months ago. I was in the kitchen, and we were arguing again about money this time. He said, "Maybe if you raised your kid right instead of babying him, we wouldn't be in court right now." I told him not to talk about my son. He smirked and said, "That boy turned out just like you, weak." Something snapped. I told him to get out. He laughed and said I wouldn't last a week on my own, that no one would want a single mum with baggage again. I told him I didn't care anymore. He left that night to stay with one of his church buddies. The church that used to adore him suddenly started keeping its distance. Word had gotten around about the guardianship case, apparently. My son's screenshots reached the pastor too. The same people who once called him a strong father figure started whispering about pride and anger issues. He lost his volunteer coordinator role. He blamed me for ruining his reputation. Good. I didn't defend him this time. I started therapy, on the advice of the court's family liaison. The therapist didn't sugarcoat anything. She said I had a conflict-avoidant attachment style, that I'd rather maintain peace than face pain head-on. That every time I stayed neutral, I was actually taking the stronger person's side. She said, "You weren't choosing your husband over your son intentionally, you were choosing stability. But to a child, it feels the same." That hit hard. Because she was right. I was terrified of losing another relationship. My first marriage fell apart when my ex cheated, and I swore I'd never be the woman who couldn't keep her family together. I thought if I kept everyone under one roof, things could be fixed. I didn't realize I'd built that roof on my son's back. I've been in therapy for 4 months now. I still cry after almost every session. I've written letters to my son that I'll probably never send. The therapist says to keep writing them anyway, to stay connected, even if it's one-sided. My husband, now ex-husband, officially served me with divorce papers last month. I signed them without hesitation. The house goes on the market next month. He took the car and most of the savings. I don't even care. I haven't seen my son in person since the courthouse. My ex-Mill sends the occasional update through the family liaison. He's finishing school early, got into a youth volunteer program at a shelter, and has a part-time job. She said he's calmer, happier, and lighter. That word hurt the most. My house made him heavy. I asked if I could send him something small for his birthday. Not a big gift, just a letter and a book he liked as a kid. She said she'd ask him. He refused the book, but kept the letter. I'll take that. So, here's where things stand. My son lives with his grandmother and barely speaks to me. My marriage is over. The church turned its back on my ex. I'm in therapy, trying to rebuild what's left of myself. It's not redemption. It's just aftermath. Sometimes I replay everything the first time my husband called him a name. The way my son's face looked when he said, "You'd rather keep him than me." I remember thinking it was just teenage dramatics. It wasn't. He meant it. He saw the truth long before I did. If anyone reading this is a parent, don't confuse keeping a family together with keeping peace. Sometimes, peace means standing up and letting the walls fall. I learned that too late. I don't know if my son will ever forgive me. I'm not expecting a reunion or some emotional resolution. I just hope that when he's ready, he remembers that I finally stopped defending the wrong person, and that I'm still here, waiting, this time on his side. Maybe that's all I can offer now. Second story. I thought my employer was weird, but she's a creep who placed a hidden camera just to watch me breastfeed my baby. I'm honestly kind of freaking out right now. For context, I'm a teen mom to my 7-month-old daughter. I recently started nannying again because I needed the income, and I took a job that wasn't ideal. 2 kids in my neighborhood for $16 per hour. I used to study child health and development in college before I dropped out to raise my daughter, and I've got about a year and a half of nannying experience. I found this family on care.com, and looking back, there were so many red flags. She had no profile picture. She refused a phone interview, saying she only does in person because she can tell character better that way. She used military time for everything, so I assumed she was ex-military. She's not, and she insisted on meeting at a school, not a coffee shop or anywhere public I suggested. She was 15 minutes late and showed up in short shorts, no bra, slippers, and high socks. Not exactly the strict, polished person I expected based on her tone over text. She had 3 kids, 6F, 4F, and almost 2M. The interview actually went okay, and because she lived nearby, I accepted the job on the spot. She mentioned paying me as a 1099 contractor, which is illegal for household employees in my state. So I told her she'd either need to do under-the-table cash or a proper W-2. She chose cash, but refused to sign a contract because she didn't want paper trails. Another red flag I should have listened to. During the interview, I specifically said no secret nanny cams. She told me she only had 2 cameras, both in her kids' rooms, which I was completely fine with. But then weird comments started happening. One day, I served the kids some fruit that was already cut up in the fridge. Later, she mentioned, "You forgot to wash it." Another time, she brought up a snack I had packed for my daughter, one I never left at her house. She mentioned me wiping down her counters with a reusable towel, something she couldn't have known unless she was watching me. She also somehow knew I use voice to text because of my dyslexia, something I never told her. At that point, I assumed there was a hidden camera or mic somewhere, which was super off-putting, considering she knew I breastfed my daughter and had specifically asked if there were any cameras. The vibe in general was off. She made really degrading comments, like saying she doesn't understand why anyone would go to college for child development, and strictly referring to me as a babysitter. She was dismissive and controlling and constantly added new chores on top of childcare to the point that I could barely focus on the kids. Her daughter would also often say some weird and concerning things. For example, "My mom's gonna be mad, but it's okay because she won't be mad at me," and "The floors are really dirty. You need to sweep them." And one time she went on a minute-long tangent about silly, forgetful people who always forget everything after I left my lunchbox at their house overnight. And along with this, and some other stuff she said, I just assumed she was repeating stuff her mother had said. But today was the breaking point. My daughter wasn't feeling well, so she wanted to be held most of the day. The 2-year-old knocked over a set of picture frames on himself. The house was not at all child-friendly. The 4-year-old had multiple meltdowns, and when I tried to calm her, she started kicking and hitting me. I let the mom know I'd need to leave early, and she agreed as long as both kids were down for a nap first. While I was feeding my daughter before leaving, I noticed the Alexa was flashing green every time I spoke. I googled it and learned that means there's a drop-in. Basically, someone is listening in. That's when I started looking around the room. And sure enough, I found a hidden camera tucked inside an open purse, pointed directly at the chair where I breastfeed my daughter. I froze. My stomach dropped. I grabbed my baby, packed up our stuff, and left without unloading the dishwasher. A few hours later, she sent me a long text rant about clarifying expectations. Basically, she wanted me to be a maid, not a nanny. All while watching 3 kids. After talking to my husband, I've decided I'm quitting immediately. I'm still shaken that someone recorded me feeding my baby without consent. I'll update once I officially quit and send her my message. But seriously, trust your gut. Comments. Comment 1. 2 words. Police report. Comment 2. Holy SHT. OP. That's absolutely disgusting and definitely illegal in most places. Recording someone breastfeeding without consent is a serious crime, like sexual exploitation level serious. Document everything you can remember and definitely file that police report ASAP. The fact that she was so sketchy about paper trails makes way more sense now. She knew exactly what she was doing. Comment 3. Okay, I'm sorry, but I keep getting hung up on the fact that these children all under 6 would be home alone after you leave, even if you put them down for a nap first. Especially after you mentioned that the house is not at all child-friendly. But yeah, her recording you without your consent is unhinged, and you should report it. OP, I am 19. I graduated high school early, starting college when I was 17 and getting married when I was 18. The children were not unattended. The mother works from home, but is upstairs. But she does have 2 cameras in each of the children's rooms. I did not take any pictures because my angle was to get out of there. I don't know how to leave an update, but I will write one tomorrow. Judgment NTA. Update 1 day later. I forgot to mention in my last post that I unplugged both the camera and the Alexa before I left that day. Between that and my mom, who's a therapist and has talked to her before strongly believing she is a narcissist, I decided I will not be returning. My mom actually helped me write a text to keep things calm and avoid any retaliation. The nanny mom knows where I live, so we wanted to be careful with how I worded it. Here's what I sent her. Thank you for sharing your concerns. Today was definitely a rough one with sick kids, lack of sleep, and a lot of challenging behaviors. After reflecting, I feel that with the expectations and the different ages, this position isn't the best fit for me. For safety reasons, I believe it would be better for you to find someone else. 2M knocking down the picture frames today because I was preoccupied with 4F. And my daughter has really shown me that it would be best for me to step away immediately for everybody's safety. She replied with, okay, wow, that was pretty unexpected. I disagree with the imminent safety concern, especially being that he is 20 months old and didn't do it with malicious intent. But I respect your decision. I will calculate your time and pay you accordingly. My mom said this is a typical response of a narcissist, taking her child's faults as her own. I just replied, thank you. And she did end up paying me, but only about 1/3 of what I was owed. Here's the message she sent with the payment. Paid. 30 minutes removed for unfulfilled obligations that I had to tend to during my lunch today. And 6 hours removed for previous overpayment of miscalculated hours. Thank you for your time with us. The unfulfilled obligations she's talking about. Dishes I had already cleaned, but didn't put away from the night before, when I wasn't even working and not sweeping the floors. Also, looking back, I feel like there were a lot of mind games played with me through stuff she heard and saw, including her miscalculating the hours. She randomly started counting my 5-hour days as 6 hours and would constantly mention it and write it on my clock-in sheet. I don't know if she was testing me. It just feels odd. She would also constantly repeat that she was a good person and had good morals. Even sometimes going as far as repeating, she's a good person, 3 times in the same conversation. I haven't filed the police report, but I also don't have any photos. I've reported her to care.com. She already has a post up. I'm planning to check in occasionally to see if it's taken down and she hired somebody else. They sort of live in my neighborhood, so maybe I'll be able to catch the nanny on a walk and give her a heads up. They also had a nanny before me that left abruptly as well. A few people pointed out in my last post that I was being severely underpaid. You're right. I've already started looking for other nanny positions and have been offered $22.25/HR, which just confirms how much I was being taken advantage of. Comments. Comment 1. Report everything to care.com. The camera and the shorting you on pay. Comment 2. That whole miscalculated hours crap screams gaslighting. Document everything, even texts. If she tries anything later, you'll have proof she's not stable. OP. I had left a toy at their house, and they left it by my mailbox, just a little bit odd. Comment 3. Yeah, that's a weird move. Could have just handed it back like a normal person. Definitely gives off awkward energy. Comment 4. Is that weird? If OP was not at home when they came to return the toy, I don't see anything wrong with leaving it by the mailbox to save a repeat journey. Also, if they are looking to avoid an awkward interaction, I can see the sense in just leaving it. I'm not defending them in general, obviously, but I just don't see this one specific thing, the toy left by the mailbox, as being particularly weird. Comment 5. Former nanny here. They will do anything they can to avoid paying you. And some are so nasty and have bad attitudes and poor employers. Leaving was the right thing, and I'm not surprised they shorted you on pay. Unfulfilled obligations are a cop-out. You were supervising their child for the full hour, and should be paid per hour whether you swept or not. Thank you for watching the video. If you are interested in listening to these kinds of stories, we've got more in store for you. Simply subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and share it with your friends.